Right. The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 5153 in the name of Drew Smith on job losses at the Clydesdale Bank. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I now call on Drew Smith to open the debate. But before I do, I just invite members who are leaving the chamber to do so quickly and quietly, and also those leaving the gallery to please. Drew Smith, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am grateful that this motion has been selected for debate, and can I first of all take the opportunity to thank all of those members who have signed up both for this motion, which we are debating today, and my earlier motion on the same subject. At the outset of my contribution, I would also wish to welcome to the public gallery Alison McLean, Senior Unite Official for the Finance Sector, and Jenny Brown, Chair of National Australia Group Committee of Unite and Chair of the Unite Finance Sector Committee. I also refer you, Presiding Officer, and other members to my register of interests as a member of the same union. The Clydesdale Bank is an important institution in Scottish banking. It was founded in Glasgow in 1838, and it is the personal bank of many Scots and of many small and medium businesses in all parts of the country. The Clydesdale has, since 1987, been part of National Australia Group. Since then, it has retained its focus as a Scottish clearing bank, headquartered in Glasgow, continuing to issue Scottish banknotes and giving support to many Scottish causes, particularly in the field of sport, having been a sponsor of the Scottish Premier League since 2007 and of the Scottish Commonwealth team since 2005. There are 300 Clydesdale branches across the United Kingdom, but around half of them are in Scotland, and Clydesdale employs 3,670 staff here. For all of these reasons and more, it is right that this Parliament takes a close interest in Clydesdale and the workers employed by it. In February of this year, National Australia Group announced a strategic review of their UK operations by Clydesdale, which includes Yorkshire Bank, and I raised the issue in this chamber with the First Minister. At that time, I wanted to ensure that the most robust possible defence was mounted to protect Scottish jobs, both because of the value of those jobs to those who do them, but also because of the strategic importance to the Scottish banking industry and the wider Scottish economy of this Glasgow institution, which has been subject to previous speculation that National Australia Group wished to divest itself of the bank. Throughout the period of this review, I have kept in close contact with the banking section of Unite the Union, and I also asked that the First Minister agree to meet with union representatives to discuss their concerns. I know that the Scottish Government did meet Clydesdale management, and I am grateful for that, but I am disappointed that correspondence I had with the First Minister appears to indicate that no specific meeting with Unite took place, which was focused on the uncertainty which has been experienced by Clydesdale workers. Members who have supported the motion in my name will, I am sure, share my concern about the news which has since emerged from the bank, and specifically the decision of the bank to close a number of financial solution centres here in Scotland. 2 business and private banking centres will close in Dunfermline and in Paisley. 2 so-called satellite centres will close at Inverurie and Bearsden. And the business and private bank centre in Stirling will be subsumed into the town branch. These closures reflect the desire of the bank to cut costs. The intention of National Australia Group is to withdraw Clydesdale and Yorkshire from property development and investment lending and to concentrate on personal lending and private banking accounts. While I obviously welcome any move which has as its objective the correcting of past mistakes, the staff who are to retain their jobs will want to be certain that the new course which National Australia has set for the Clydesdale is the correct one. I have been advised prior to this debate by the Clydesdale Bank, as well as obviously by the union, and while I welcome that many of the affected staff have had the opportunity and will have the opportunity to transfer within the business, and that most of those leaving the business are doing so through voluntary redundancy, it is a matter of great regret that some are being made compulsory redundant. The figures I have from the bank itself indicate that 20 Scottish staff are to be forced out in this way, and across the UK I understand that a number of those staff who are having to leave their jobs will do so today. Glasgow, in some respects, is likely to be a beneficiary of centralisation of some of the bank's activities, and I can hardly fail to welcome any new jobs which might be created or moved to my city. However, that does not lessen my concern that almost 100 jobs are being lost in the Scottish banking sector as a result of these changes, up from a previous suggested figure of 60. This follows on from the considerable pain which has been experienced by workers at Clydesdale's larger competitors in Scotland over recent years, and indeed weeks, with the news that Lloyds are to close their call centre in Motherwell. It could be said that Scotland is faring better by the changes at Clydesdale and Yorkshire, as the majority of the 1,400 jobs are being lost in other parts of the UK, and as I understand it, particularly in the south of England. However, redundancy, whether voluntary or compulsory, will be difficult for many of the bank's hard-working and loyal staff. It is a cliché to add, particularly at this time of year, Presiding Officer, because in truth, being told that your job and that the work that you do is no longer required by your employer is a traumatic experience whenever and under whatever circumstances it occurs. For many of those who are leaving Clydesdale, it is uncertain where they will find new employment, and it is concerning that many of the skills which they have will be lost. Presiding Officer, in seeking to have this issue debated by Parliament, I have sought to highlight the changes which are occurring at Clydesdale, essentially a retreat into the bank's traditional heartlands and its more traditional banking products. The future success of this bank is, I believe, important for its customers, which does, as I have said, include a significant proportion of small and medium businesses in Scotland, and for the banking industry as a source of good quality employment. Of course.
Would the member accept that the Clydesdale Bank in particular is now the subject of review in relation to many of its lending products to small businesses by the Financial Services Authority, and this cannot be doing much good for the long-term reputation of the bank?
I'm not aware of all of the detail of that, Mr Campbell, and so I wouldn't wish to comment on it further, other than to say that in bringing this debate to the Chamber, my concern is that we do shine a light on Clydesdale Bank and do all that we can to ensure that Clydesdale Bank remains an important part of the Scottish banking industry, and clearly the maintenance of its reputation in all respects is absolutely vital to that. In closing, Presiding Officer, can I again take the opportunity to urge Clydesdale management and their owners, National Australia, to continue discussing the future of the bank with their own staff and their Unite representatives, not least because I know that there are many changes to the internal structures of the bank and management of those who remain, which will require the close cooperation of the staff side if these changes are not to be a precursor to a further retrenchment in the years to come. National Australia also need to make clear that they have a long-term commitment to Clydesdale and are not simply preparing to sell up when the market is right for them. Can I also urge the Minister, on behalf of the Scottish Government, to take a close interest in the decisions which are being taken? A close eye will help to ensure that the Clydesdale Bank remains an important name on Scotland's High Street, a vital banker and lender to Scotland's small business, and a significant employer of bank workers in the years ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr Smith. I now call on Richard Lyle to be followed by James Kelly. Around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wish to congratulate Drew Smith for securing this debate today on the proposed job losses in the Clydesdale Bank. As a customer of Clydesdale for over 40 years, I am surprised by the actions of the bank in proposing, as reported by the BBC, to reduce its workforce by nearly 1,400 by the year 2015. This Glasgow-based lender, which includes the Yorkshire Bank, says that bad debts have risen by almost 90% to reach £631 million. The problem with their bad debt has been attributed to falling commercial property values. The bank made an underlying profit when bad debts were excluded, but they reported that profit was down 16% to £448 million, as again reported by BBC News Scotland Business. Along with the Yorkshire Bank, Clydesdale has cut costs with 468 jobs shed during the year to September. The Chief Executive of the Clydesdale Bank has already said that the austerity programme of the UK Government has also contributed to the harsh business environment and its decision to carry out the review. The two bank brands run out of Glasgow have been a subject of long-running speculation, as the National Bank of Australia, the parent company, has also sent out conflicting signals on what it wants to do with its only European operation. The Australian economy is doing relatively well, and with opportunities to expand in Asia, the Clydesdale Bank has been seen increasingly as a problem for its owner. The Group Chief Executive has already stated that UK GDP has declined by 0.2% in the December quarter, and these difficult conditions have adversely affected the performance of the UK banking. Over the last few years, we have heard and read about the banking crisis. Household name banks have been partly taken over by the UK Government through the buying of shares. For 10 years of my life, I worked for one of those household name banks, the Royal Bank of Scotland. Then our division was made redundant. I know what redundancy feels like. In that 10 years prior to the millennium, everything was rosy for the Royal Bank of Scotland in particular. Management wanted to mark the millennium, which they did by making a £2 billion profit. That's 2,000 million in the year 2000. Banks could do no wrong, and the money poured in and out, profits grew and the share prices rose. They thought it could never end, but we forgot Black Monday and Black Wednesday in the prior decades with the ongoing financial crisis. Household banks have paid the price over the last number of years. I would suggest that too many jobs have been lost in the banking sector, both branch and centres, and I would like to speak about both sectors. The Clydesdale Bank has not been swept up in the storm which then erupted. This bank has not had the same daily publicity as other national banks. I would say to the management of that bank, they need to look at any future decisions. As I said in my speech, the start of my speech, I am a customer of the Clydesdale Bank. I believe in that bank, as I still do in the Royal Bank. But I get annoyed when I have to wait in a queue, when they don't have enough tellers in the desks, or I wait for phones to be answered, or when I receive an automated answer when I phone a call centre. I get annoyed in my local town when the Clydesdale Bank is not opened on a Saturday, when across the road the Royal Bank is. Not everyone has a computer. Not everyone wants to do money transfers over the internet. Some customers still believe in counter transactions and still want to deal with a face-to-face in their local bank. But they also want call centres and financial solution centres, which are still required for customers who do internet banking. Yes, I know some banks close early now because they say customers are not coming into the branch. They don't come in because they're working. I would strongly suggest that banks do stay open late for the customers, and they should not, still do not cater for customers through their call centres. I would also say they do not cater for customers now as they did in the past. They must cater for all customers, both branch and centres. I get annoyed when people who have worked for a firm for many years, who have given good service and commitment and made profits for firms, when they have rent to pay, mortgages, car payments, families to look after, are cast on the scrap heap because a firm wants to restructure. The Clydesdale Bank is a good bank, and I hope after today they will still accept my business even after this speech. I would ask the Clydesdale Bank to reconsider the proposal for further redundancies in these centres and ask all banks to provide a better service. I'm sure that Clydesdale could show the way to other banks in providing confidence in the way they still carry out their business. I believe the Clydesdale Bank is an asset to Scotland and their staff deserve better. And in finishing, I would ask the owners of the Clydesdale reconsider their plans, give their staff in these centres the Christmas they deserve, and I support Drew Smith's motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. I now call on James Kelly to be followed by Gavin Brown.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to start by congratulating Drew Smith on securing today's members' debate on this important issue of job losses at the Clydesdale Bank. Clearly, the motion focuses on the recent spate of job losses, but this builds on the previous announcement from 2011. And as Drew Smith said in his speech, the most recent run of job losses, numbers 100. But it's not just that statistic, it's the human impact that has on individuals' lives, particularly at this time of year as we run towards Christmas. The prospect of losing your job is deeply unsettling for families, and it feeds on throughout local communities. Particularly when you look at what has been proposed here in terms of closing 4 of these solution centres in different communities throughout Scotland. That means that there are jobs lost in each of these areas, and that has a knock-on effect not only to families but also to local businesses and local economies. So that's something that we should reflect upon. Like Drew Smith, I also want to pay tribute to the Unite Trade Union and the campaign that they've led, opposing these job losses and speaking up and supporting their members. I think in an instance like this, it shows the importance of trade unions in the workplace in order to represent people and give voice, to those concerns and anxieties. I think another aspect of these job losses that is deeply regrettable is that these are skilled jobs. We hear a lot of talk and discussion, and we'll hear it again this afternoon, no doubt, in the Finance Committee debate on the draft budget, about the importance of growing the economy. One of the aspects of that is you need skilled jobs, you need skilled workers, and it's to be regretted that in the downsizing that we're seeing the Clydesdale Bank do here, that it's taken those skilled jobs out of the economy, and there's not only an impact on people's lives, but has an impact on economic growth. I think Richard Lyle, poses an interesting question just as to how, clearly the Clydesdale Bank have put forward a model in terms of trying to make their business more successful. But as Richard Lyle, has pointed out, some of the things that have been introduced, result in longer queues, people being stuck on telephone for longer than they would wish. And that has an impact on the bank's, customer base, because people understandably don't like that sort of treatment and will then go to other banks. So I think the bank have to reflect on the proposals that they're making and whether they actually are going to lead to good business. I also think that the Clydesdale Bank do have a good record in terms of supporting the community events. But I think if you're going to talk that up as a business, then you need to be prepared to give something back to the community. And they're not doing that in closing down these 4 solution centres in different parts of Scotland. In summing up, Deputy Presiding Officer, I think it's important that the bank reflect on the business model that they're putting across. They reflect on the impact that this is going to have on people and communities. I would also urge the Scottish Government to use their influence in discussions with the bank to minimise the impact of these job losses and to try and put forward an alternative business model that will not only safeguard these jobs but will also benefit the wider Scottish economy.
Many thanks. Now call on Gavin Brown to be followed by Stuart Stevenson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I also begin by congratulating Drew Scott on securing this debate today. I think across the Chamber there is bound to be disappointment at the loss of jobs being suffered within the Clydesdale Bank. I think there is genuine regret at the closure of financial solution centres. I thought they were a particularly innovative invention at the time, and to see any of them go is a disappointment. And I think we all have to acknowledge the effects that there will be on those who lose their jobs and their families, and particularly, I think, has been highlighted, those who are made redundant without voluntary redundancy. They're forced into it. So all of those, I think, will probably unite the Chamber in terms of some of the emotions they feel. In terms of looking at the strategic review of the bank more widely, there are two points, I think, that are worth noting and I think give us some hope for the future. One is the intention of the bank to concentrate in the future in its heartland, which it describes as Scotland and Yorkshire. And I think that intention, if it is carried through at an operational level going forward, will be welcome, not just in Glasgow, to which Drew Smith alluded, but to other parts of Scotland as well. And the second point, I think, is that while there are some real painful short-term decisions being made here, I think we have to hope that if a more sustainable operation and a more secure operation is created, then it will be better for Scotland and for the Clydesdale, not just in the medium term, but in the long term as well. Now, only time will tell whether this strategic review actually achieves that. But if it does, it will make, hopefully, those jobs that exist still more secure, and hopefully going forward it can attract more business and start to grow more successfully again. And when the Minister does the summing up, I suspect she's bound to address these issues already, but I would be interested to know, just for the record, what work the Government has done specifically with the Clydesdale in relation to the redundancies, what meetings have taken place so far, such that they're allowed to be talked about, and if there is anything planned in the coming months to assist those who have lost their jobs. I suspect there are some issues cannot be discussed in the public domain, but anything that is allowed to be put on the record, I would certainly be grateful to hear from the Minister. Ultimately, though, Deputy Presiding Officer, it is actually important that the Clydesdale Bank succeeds in Scotland. It has a very good track record through the years. It is an important institution. It has been for a long, long time, as has been pointed out. And we actually need them, I think, for the good of the Scottish economy to succeed. They're a large employer, with branches, of course, all over Scotland, with important centres within Scotland, so we have to hope that it remains the case. But also, I think they're critical because we do need competition within our banking sector. If we were to lose the Clydesdale in a large slice of their operations, that would make banking in Scotland even less competitive than it currently is, which ultimately would be bad news for business, particularly small businesses, who would have even less choice than they do today, and for consumers who are not businesses, who again would have less choice than they currently do today. So for all of these reasons, Deputy Presiding Officer, I hope the decisions that the bank has taken prove to be sustainable in the long term, but acknowledge, I think, quite clearly and openly that there is some short-term pain, and across the Chamber, the effects of those who have lost their jobs and their families will be remembered, certainly this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now call on Stuart Stevenson to be followed by Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and let me, like others, thank Drew Smith for the opportunity to discuss this issue in Parliament. And let me declare, just for the avoidance of doubt, my continued regretful shareholding in Lloyds Banking Group, since I'm going to be talking about banking generally. It's really a matter of great regret in what's happened in the banking industry in particular, the great division there is between the rewards that there appear to have been for failure at the top of too many banking organisations and the very real price and hardship that's experienced by those in the front line who have not had the luxury of very much gold-plated pensions and large payoffs. So at Christmas in particular, our thoughts are with those frontline staff and their families. The broad causes of banking difficulty have been well discussed. But a couple of the causes are worthy of a little bit of examination. One is the interaction between investment banking and clearing banking. In the aftermath of the last crash in the 1930s, we saw Democrats Carter Glass and Henry Stegall bring forward legislation that required separation between investment banking and clearing banking. Section 20 of the 1933 Glass-Steagall Act prohibited any bank in the Federal Reserve System from being involved in the issue, flotation, underwriting, public sale or distribution of securities. That was a successful innovation that protected the clearing bank system really across the world for many generations of bankers and bank customers. The Glass-Steagall Act also put a geographic limit on the operation of United States banks. They could only operate in a single state. That didn't work so well. Banks like the Bank of America, based in California, simply went international. Banks like Citibank, based in New York, did the same. So some of it worked and some of it didn't. There was an attempt in the mid-30s to overturn some of this, but President Roosevelt said the old abuses will come back if underwriting were restored in any shape, manner or form within the clearing bank system. And so we are here today because that is precisely what happened. Firstly, in the United States in the 60s, the Glass-Steagall Act began to be interpreted in a different way, and you saw the barriers breaking down. And in the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher's government basically did the same here. So that's one of the causes of the causes. The other one, which is contemporary, is one of qualifications. Frontline staff are encouraged to study in their spare time, and many achieve a qualification from the Institute of Bankers that is at least equivalent to a first degree, and in my view, given that you have to do it in your spare time, a much harder qualification to achieve, and it's regarded as absolutely necessary for frontline staff. But it's worth noting, interestingly, that such qualifications and the experience that goes with it has been notably absent from the ranks of senior management in both the Royal Bank and the Bank of Scotland, and to a lesser extent in the Clydesdale Bank. When the Royal Bank and the Bank of Scotland both got into difficulties, there was only a single senior manager in each bank had any banking qualification of any kind. We need the frontline staff to be qualified, and yet somehow we've got a system that allows the people who make the real key decisions to be unqualified. I can't help feeling that that contributes to that. It's just worth, in closing, to say that the Clydesdale Bank, in a sense, was lucky. They'd previously been owned by Midland in the 1980s, at a time when everybody was fearful Midland were going down the tubes. They nearly did. Hong Kong and Shanghai saved them. They sold off Clydesdale. But Clydesdale were ill-managed and ill-served by the Australian owners. We saw rapid turnover of chief executives in a year, 18 months. We didn't see the kind of support that enabled them to develop their franchise. And actually, as luck have it, kept them out of some of the mire that other banks got into. But nonetheless, that inattention is still part of where we are today. Finally, I close by reminding people that the previous name of the Clydesdale was, of course, Clydesdale and North of Scotland Bank. And so, therefore, for me and my constituency, this is not simply a matter in Glasgow. It's a matter that touches on my constituency's interests and people right across Scotland. Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. Many thanks. I now call on Neil Bibby, after which we'll move to the Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I refer to my register of interest as a member of Unite. I'd like to join members in thanking my colleague Drew Smith for bringing forward this important debate this afternoon. As he said in his opening comments, the Clydesdale Bank is an important institution and an important employer here in Scotland. I think it's right that we recognise the contribution that Clydesdale Bank makes to our economy, but I'm sure we were all very concerned to hear of the bank's decision to close a number of financial solution centres in Scotland. As is the case with all job losses, there will undoubtedly have been a significant impact on staff and their families. I want to give a particular focus to Paisley in my own region. The Clydesdale Bank Centre at Phoenix Business Park is one of 2 business and private banking centres to close, with a reported loss of around 20 jobs. This was, as members have said, part of a restructuring move and the loss of 100 jobs across 4 Scottish centres. In Paisley, the staff affected dealt with private and business interests, along with some positions in risk control functions. I welcome that a number of employees have had the opportunity to move to another department within the business, but that will not offer any comfort to the unfortunate members of staff who face compulsory redundancy through no fault of their own. David Fleming, the National Officer at Unite, described the move as devastating for staff and their families, many of whom have served the bank for many years. There is no denying the significant impact redundancy has on individuals and families. There is also the wider issue of the loss of skills and experience from the sector. The most recent unemployment statistics show that there are just over 2,700 people claiming job seekers allowance in Paisley, the second highest overall figure in the West of Scotland region. Therefore, it's clear that those who lose their job at the Clydesdale Bank may face a real challenge in finding new employment. Presiding Officer, I should say that I welcome the bank's desire to become stronger, more secure and better able to challenge larger banks and offer choice in the market that it operates. They will no doubt have business reasons for that decision. However, staff at the bank will want to know that this new path will not result in another round of job losses and further uncertainty in the future. I think it's important to recognise that the job losses at Clydesdale Bank do not stand alone and instead represent a further blow to the Paisley area following a number of decisions that impact on the local economy and employment in the area. It comes at the same time as Renfrewshire continues to trail behind other local authority areas when it comes to Scottish Government funding. Renfrewshire Council is the only mainland council in Scotland to have been allocated the minimal possible grant for funding by the Scottish Government for the past 3 years in a row. Presiding Officer, Renfrewshire is a fantastic place with hundreds of excellent employers and thousands of skilled, hard-working employees and good infrastructure links. but it is clear that greater investment and more employment opportunities are needed. The new Labour Council is working hard to bring in the required investment and boost the local economy, but its ambition for the area must be matched not only by businesses but by the Scottish Government as well. Finally, Presiding Officer, I would like to join Drew Smith and others in urging Clydesdale's senior management to continue dialogue with the staff and Unite representatives, some of whom are here today, and take into account the importance of the Clydesdale Bank to communities like Paisley, not only as a lender but as an employer as well.
Many thanks. Now call on the Minister, Angela Constance, to conclude the debate, please, on behalf of the Government.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Like other members, I would like to thank Drew Smith for raising this motion and also for securing this debate this afternoon. I understand and very much share his concerns for workers in his own region and across Scotland. As with all other banks in Scotland and beyond, Clydesdale Bank is facing significant pressures as a result of the financial crisis. And as we've heard, in response to those difficulties, National Australia Bank, the owner of Clydesdale and Yorkshire Banks, announced on the 7th of February that it would undertake a strategic review of its UK operations, and this review was prompted by poor economic and trading conditions in the UK. And as mentioned by Mr Smith, jobs have indeed been lost. 2 business and private banking centres in Dunfermline and Paisley are to close, and the 2 satellite centres in Inverurie and Bearsden will also close, and we've heard from Mr Bibby about the community impact of some of these closures, although I would like to say to him that in terms of Renfrewshire, Renfrewshire certainly receives some opportunities for all funding in terms of youth employment. But with regards to these 4 centres, of the 51 people located in these centres, the Clydesdale Bank itself reports that all bar 14 have transferred to new roles within Clydesdale Bank or the National Australia Bank Group. And of these 14, 7 applied for voluntary severance and 7 were affected by compulsory redundancy. The Clydesdale Bank also reports that between October 2011 and September 2012 that there had been 104 redundancies in Scotland. 84 of those were through voluntary severance. And its own figures state that between October 2012 and December this year, there have been a further 66 positions that will be made redundant, in excess of 170 redundancies. We have, of course, as Mr Smith stated, heard of the new positions that will be created in Glasgow, and the Clydesdale Bank stated position is that over the course of the review period, which takes us up to 2015, there will be a net reduction of fewer than 100 roles in Scotland. Although, like Mr Smith, I think any job loss has to be regretted, and we heard from Richard Lyle this afternoon his quite personal account of being a financial services worker who himself has experienced redundancy. And of course James Kelly was quite correct to articulate the human costs of redundancy, not just on individuals but on their families and on communities. Now, the Clydesdale Bank has also articulated its intention that, wherever possible, it is seeking to minimise the number of job losses and is striving to preserve the bank's Scottish base. The bank has said that it will maintain its retail network of 149 Scottish branches and its retail frontline staffing levels. Compulsory redundancies, according to the bank, will only be made as a last resort, and so far the majority of job losses have been achieved through voluntary severance. Nevertheless, I have to repeat that I recognise that every job lost is an enormous difficulty for the employees concerned, particularly at this time of year. There's never a good time of the year for redundancy, but it does, of course, always feel so much worse at Christmas. And all our thoughts are with those workers and their families. Now, if I could just, in the time I've got left, reassure both Mr Smith and answer some of the points raised by Mr Brown in terms of this government's support and the contact that we've had both with Unite the Union and the Clydesdale Bank. But let me start by saying that this Government is and will continue to do all that it can to support those affected by redundancies, and that we are maintaining close contact with the Clydesdale Bank, particularly as the review progresses. Both the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth have spoken with David Thorburn, the Chief Executive of Clydesdale and Yorkshire Banks, when the strategic review was first announced to discuss the protection of employment in Scotland. In May, the First Minister, who chairs FISAB, had the opportunity at FISAB to be with both David Thorburn and David Fleming from Unite the Union. In October, the First Minister had his most recent biannual with STUC, and Agnes Talmy from Unite was also part of that. But since then, the First Minister has met yesterday, the 19th of December, with representatives from Unite the Union to discuss the ongoing situation. And the First Minister has now also written to the Clydesdale Bank to seek reassurances that everything possible is being done to minimise compulsory redundancies, and that there will be no branch closures as a result of this review. And the First Minister's letter is also very supportive of Unite's offer to work with the bank in terms of the training opportunities, to make more training opportunities available to workers. And in particular, there's the Chartered Banker Professional Standards Foundation grade, and we've heard Stuart Stevenson speak of the importance of banking qualifications. Now, members will also be aware of the role and purpose of the Finance Sector Jobs Task Force, which works directly with companies to coordinate the public sector support where restructuring may result in reduction in employee numbers. And the task force has offered support to the Clydesdale Bank and will continue to do so throughout the review period. And in October, the chair of the task force from Scottish Enterprise, Jill Farrell, has also met with the Clydesdale Bank. Importantly, the Partnership Action for Continuing Employment PACE, the PACE initiative, which provides very extensive tailored help and support for employees anywhere in Scotland affected by redundancy, also stands ready to provide any support required. And where PACE can intervene early, even in these difficult economic times, they do have considerable success in supporting staff who experience redundancy on to further work. Now, I know that the National Australia Bank has appointed PENA to support staff at risk of redundancy, and PACE have continued to make an offer to PENA over and above what PENA are contracted to do, and PENA have said that they most certainly will refer to PACE as required. And obviously, as the Skills Minister, I would be happy to keep a watchful eye on that. Just in conclusion, Presiding Officer, James Kelly touched on an important point, the important point of skilled jobs. The financial services workforce, 38% of that workforce is graduates, 50% of the financial services workforce is qualified SVQ 4 or above. And, one of the challenges for the economy just now is not just unemployment, but it's also underemployment. Therefore, sectors that actually employ skilled, qualified staff are very important. We all know that this is a difficult time for the financial services sector in Scotland and, of course, globally. However, this Government is committed, fully committed to ensuring the success of the financial services industry in Scotland through the work of our enterprise agencies, through FISAB, which is chaired by the First Minister and supported by the highest levels of the industry in Scotland. We continue to offer support via PACE, and if I can just end by reassuring the members today who have participated in this debate and by the workers currently experiencing or at risk of redundancy, that the Scottish Government most certainly will continue to take a very close interest in this matter.
Thank you very much. I now suspend this meeting until 2:15. 2:15. Thank you.